Welcome to Stalwarts of Transformation. Today's Stalwart is a very successful entrepreneur, a change maker, and a well renowned figure in the security industry. From launching his first company in the 80s to shaping industry wide ethics and innovation, Mr. Anil Puri has led from the front. He believes security is not a cost, it is a catalyst for trust, efficiency, and impact. A mentor, a leader, and a voice for reform. He is the group chairman of APS Group and CMD of AP Securitas. Please welcome our stalwart, Mr. Anil Puri. Welcome to the show, sir. I'm now going to talk about the early years that shaped you. Sir, so you started your entrepreneurial journey in mid 80s. So what were those years like? What was your driving force?
So basically, see, when life began, I was an army brat, so to say, in terms of the fact that my father was in the services. And as used to happen in the services at that point in time, my father was never posted in any one place long enough for me to be able to set down roots in a school over there. So every 2 years, you moved into a new place, you made a whole lot of new friends, you lost friends, you had no continuity on any of this thing. And every time that you went over to a new place, you had to try and find out your feet over there. And that is something which I believe that the armed forces children have the biggest advantage because they learn to be able to adapt. They learn to be able to figure out how to deal with situations. And that is one of the biggest requirements in entrepreneurship. Wherever you do anything, how has your background been? How did you deal with things when you were a child? How did you deal with your formative growing years? And the armed forces gives you this thing. It gives you the idea of knowing that people are important in every aspect of life. And without interaction with people or how to deal with people, keeping sentiments in mind, keeping feelings in mind, keeping various other aspects in mind, is the only way that you can progress in an industry, especially in the security industry, which is manpower intensive. So dealing with manpower became a lot easier because of the way that we had been brought up, where my father dealt with a whole lot of soldiers, how they did it in the armed forces. So we learned from all those things.
Amazing, amazing.
So that is how we did all that.
So the leadership lessons, they came in early, right?
We came in early because that is when even in the armed forces was a different time totally. And the officer cadre in the Indian Armed Forces also always leads from the front. Right? So as a child, I always saw these kind of things, the decisions. Obviously, we were not open to the decisions, but the way things were conducted, how he interacted with people, how he interacted and gave instructions, those are the kind of things that learned, and they are the ones which have helped in dealing with the industry today. Yeah, so basically what I was explaining to you was that leadership is something which you learn as you're growing up. You learn from the environment around you, and nothing better than the armed forces to be able to teach you how to deal with life and how to take circumstances head on and go ahead and deal with them.
And anything you remember about your very first project or hustle? Anything?
See, when we started work, the biggest challenge at that point in time was that we were not getting contracts primarily because my father was not based over here. He was based in Calcutta and he moved back. And I was working with the Taj Hotel at that point in time. So I had basically done hotel management. And post hotel management, I was working with the Taj. But I was fed up of saying, yes, sir, 3 bags full to anybody and everybody. And the issue that was there was that I got after my father because he, after retirement, joined the State Bank of India as the Circle Security Head for Eastern India.
Correct.
Right. So that was the logical thing which came to my mind, that he's always been in the armed forces where security is there. Then post that, he's doing security in the private sector. So I got after him that when he took his second superannuation, I told him, I said, I want to leave. I want to start something of my own. And I want your help to be able to do it, and we'll do it together. So what used to happen is that I used to go and meet the people, but I could utilize his rank, his age, his experience, his knowledge as a base to be able to deal with it. So we got one large contract, and the contract was, of course, was not given to me on my standing, but was given because of my father's standing as as colonel from the armed forces. And I used to go and deal with that, and that was all the way about 80 kilometers away from Delhi. So you had to go on a two-wheeler on the highway, which was ahead of Manesar, and you would go there. You had a small little contingent over there. But the beautiful part used to be that people were very much simpler then. You went there, they looked after you. You had actually gone to do an inspection on the site. But the way that you were looked after by your guards over there was the way that brought up the entire organization. That's where I basically got the first learnings in terms of the fact that how do you deal with your people and how do you win their loyalty and their dependence on you.
So that is how the
people-centric approach began in the organization.
Right.
And I remember we had a Subedar Major there at that point in time, and he was the first one who actually allowed me to interact with the men, so to say. And when I used to sit with them, he used to guide me through, because in the armed forces, it's that rank which actually deals with all the men. And he guided me and taught me a huge amount of things on how you listen to the people, how you understand what they're saying, and how you read between the lines of what they are saying. Because that reading in between the lines is far more important. Because when he's talking to an owner or a senior person, he's talking a different language. Things are slightly different. How do you correlate between the two? That was the most important.
So how have things changed from back in 80s to how they are now in terms of managing a company, setting up an organization, taking care of the guards, having a people-centric approach? Because as far as we know that in the initial days, guards were not, one could charge any amount from the client. There were not clear wages. There was no guidelines to it. How have things changed from the 80s?
I'll explain to you what happened was, people were very, very simple, straightforward, and yes, they did not know. They were not aware of things, right? That was the biggest thing. So, as you rightly said, you could charge anything, you could do anything. That was always possible. But the bigger issue was that if you were looking at running an organization in the 80s, the business environment was totally open to whichever way you dealt with it. And there was no structure in that. The structure in businesses actually started happening from about the 2000s plus. When the awareness between people, the social media, the knowledge, the experience. I'll give you a small example. In the 80s, nobody knew what are the minimum wages. Today, every guard knows exactly what he's got to get, how much he's to get, what are the deductions, what are the compliances. He knows it on his fingertips. That was something which way back in the 80s, nobody knew. Right? So you could charge whatever. You had to pay a basic this thing, which is what was agreed to with the person.
Right.
Not based on the reality of the minimum wage. Because even the minimum wage value was not really known. So what you did was you fixed a value with a guy. You should have always maintained, and we as an organization always maintained, that whatever was settled with him was paid to the penny.
So you've spoken about people-centric approach. According to you, what is that one quality that a leader must not compromise on?
He cannot compromise on the basic word that he's given. In our organization, it has always been a fact that the word once given, whatever it was, with hindsight, you may have realized you've given a wrong commitment. But once that commitment is made, it has to be followed through.
Okay.
You cannot make a change because the man is going on what you have told him. He is not concerned what is the background of a thing. He is saying, sir, you told me I will get this. That's it. I'm happy with what you told me. I need to get that. So that is how the basic words has to be always maintained.
And working alongside your father, what was that key lesson that you learned, or something that moved you or guided you on the path of life that you are on right now?
See, basically, again, as I said, it was commitment, because that is the way that he lived his life, because there was a way the armed forces teaches you to live a life, right? It was the same kind of strictness that was there in our growing up period. So we learned on the fact that timings is important. You learned with the fact that commitment made is to be done. You were learned of the fact that how do you talk, behave, stand, indicate, discuss something. All that is very important in the way that you are viewed by either your clients or by your men. Both of them have to have the faith in the way you conduct yourself. That is the single most important thing in life. Because people actually end up displaying their weaknesses in the way that they dress, the way that they talk, the way that they stand, the way that they interact with people. The discerning person at the other end can figure out a lot about you. Right? So how you do it is the way that you have to be able to be looked at.
So you've built, scaled, and sold security businesses. So what were your earlier challenges when you set up AP Securitas?
See, the basic this thing, as I explained, that it was a very unstructured business.
Okay.
Right? People viewed us as chokidars and as thekedars, as the word would be in India. The idea of trying to make the clients understand that security is not only about warm bodies or a head count, but that they can actually be viewed as a loss prevention. That was the single biggest challenge. The other challenges were around the financial and other aspects of that, where you have to make people understand that they need to pay you in time because you got a commitment to pay. The biggest challenge of the industry is that in the fact that there's a whole lot of credit periods that people are giving. Then to make people understand that it is not a question of a minimum wage game. It is a question of a good salary so that the man can live well enough to be able to provide you a proper service. Along with that, obviously, the company needs to be able to earn. So there used to be a time when you got fantastic service charges, and then this undercutting and cost cutting basis happened. So those things all reduced those margins, but those were challenges. Going back to banks and trying to get credit facilities was another issue, which, see, any business where the credit periods are 90 days and 120 days, you need cash flows to be there. So one of the ways was to be able to get a credit from the banks, a line of credit from the banks. They would never do it because A, service industry was not looked at very well. B, we did not have any tangible assets. It is all our asset is our word and the business that we are doing. But because contracts are yearly, there is no perceived continuity to the business. So the banks also would not give you a credit line. So all those were very difficult aspects which you had to deal with. And they prevented scale up of business, or they hindered the scale up of business. But then if you had to scale up, because that was the only way out, you had to look at the basic fact that cash flows and money value is not in the rupee terms that you take home. It is more in terms of the value created in the organization, right? This industry, if you look at it, bulk of it is private limited companies. Now, there's a value creation which needs to be looked at. So, that value creation is different from cash flows, is different from cash in hand. How do you do that? So that is the challenge which everybody faces.
Right.
And that is what we have tried to overcome that. We built businesses like I set up, AP Securitas was the basic business. Then we started Securitrans, which is the cash in transit business.
Yeah, I was about to ask you about other ventures as well. Yes,
so when
yes,
we
yes.
started cash in transit, we were one of the first few people who started this, and that was an industry which was not established. There were no norms. So we worked on norms, we worked on processes, we worked on ways forward while we were standing on the ground and doing activities. So if you had to do a process for a cash, you actually did it from a gut feel. You sat down with the banks, you worked out a detail, but then the clients and the banks were appreciative of the fact that it is uncharted territory. We all were working on this thing on a best effort basis. And the banks rewarded you for the fact that you did something on a best effort basis. You learned, and then you established the process, and then you maintained the process. Right? So when we did that, we scaled up quite a bit, and there were basically 3-4 companies which were really doing this activity. And we were able to expand that business to quite a large extent because we did basically the cash management. We did the bullion into the country in terms of the gold and silver. And then we broke into the market of Angariya service, which was the movement
quite a difficult,
which is a very, very difficult business to break into.
Absolutely, right.
Right. So it was an unorganized sector which we tried to break into, and we were successful to break into that. In fact, ours was the first organization which actually started moving packets for the industry to different locations and delivering. So there were challenges around that, but we worked around that. We found ways and means to be able to do that. Now, that business scaled up, and we got an offer from Blackstone, which is a private equity company, and we exited that business. Building a business, scaling a business, and then knowing when you should actually exit the business are 3 different things.
I agree.
Right? We were fortunate that we exited the business at the right kind of time, because post that the business went through a lot of upheavals. Today, again, over a period of time, it is establishing itself and it's coming up to stature. But in between, there was a huge thing, and we were happy to say that our organization was the first one which actually exited the business. We had established the market, we established the ways of doing work, and then we exited. Now people have taken it forward, it's expanded, the whole service levels have expanded. So, but that is how. But what we learned out of that exit was that what I mentioned earlier, rupee term does not have as much value as much as the valuation has. That learning is what we learned post that exit. Had we worked better, maybe we would have had a much better exit. But nobody knew those things.
So which year did you shift into man guarding when you made an exit?
Man guarding was the one we started with.
Okay, but then cash in transit?
Cash in transit came along subsequently.
And then you exited that?
Then we exited that. That we exited in 2011.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And we continued with the man
guarding, of course.
Right? So then during the exit, post that for about 3-4 years, we were living in the euphoria of having exited a business, and then we got down back to the level that we need to run the business because there was a commitment to one part of the business. And what I've always maintained is that as owners, we are riding a tiger.
Absolutely.
In this business, because it's manpower related, there are liabilities around that. And that's not a business that you can get off. If you get off the tiger, you'll get mauled. As it is, we are riding a tiger and we are getting mauled in a different manner. It's a roller coaster which happens every day. Every day, every day, I would rather say every hour, there's a new challenge which you have to deal with. Because if you got people, I've got 40,000 people spread all over the country, there's always going to be some issue, some client issue, some manpower issue, some related issues which are going to be there. And you got to be able to have the resilience and an organization which is responsive to these things. The basic requirement is that the organization must be responsive. So you have to have people who are subject matter experts in their particular aspects.
Correct.
Who got to be able to respond with a long-term vision. not a knee-jerk action. Because knee-jerk action is what you really do, but at that immediate reaction, because where manpower in India is concerned, you need to take that knee-jerk action and solve the problem then and there. But then, are you going to allow it to continue? You have to take it into a level where long-term that problem is there. So that only happens when you have a responsive team who takes on that, post that, puts in processes into place, puts in structures into place which do not allow these kind of issues.
And so you've been a problem solver since the very beginning, of your life.
The industry is a problem-solving industry.
Yes, and you have those skills. You've displayed those
We've
skills.
had to deal with
back
that.
in those days of 1975 to 1979, you did when there were humble beginnings. You had the mindset of a problem solver. Cut to 2025.
See, if you look at 75 to 79 and prior to that, I basically had gone to our village, which is in Madhya Pradesh, and I lived a life on a farm and I helped my family there in running a business there, which was, to say the least, Madhya Pradesh was quite a difficult place to do. That's where I learned how to be able to run a business. I set up a stone crusher unit. I set up a brick-kiln, this thing for the family there, because my family was into the irrigation and construction work there. In Madhya Pradesh, where things were not the best of circumstances, we earned our spurs there. So you knew how to run and under the adversities that are there in life. Switching over to the current time, when we started here, the things were similar, but here the structure was a lot easier when you were talking in terms like Delhi. But then as the business expanded into the interiors of the country, all those problems came back and I had dealt with them before, so I knew how to deal with them.
So what challenges do private security agencies face when clients undervalue their work? You have to just let us know.
This thing is to be able to make a client understand that what he's paying for the service to a security company or to a guard is actually it's not going to affect its profitability just by what he's paying. Profitability is actually achieved because of savings that the guards are going to be able to do, the loss prevention which is going to happen. Right? Industry-wise, loss prevention is what we really do. But we are trying to say that we are securing the world. Yes, we are. How are we securing it? By making life a lot easier. By ensuring that the millions or the billions of property that you leave on one guard there, try not to compromise on paying that guy, but because you are going home believing that one guard is there. What are you paying him? Is nothing. But you're leaving your entire, maybe your house or your building or your factory, which is huge in value. So we need to make our clients understand that. The good part is people are beginning to now do that. Circumstances are changing. The government is bringing in regulation. As the country expands, a lot of people are beginning to understand the value of what security brings to the table. There have been a lot of ex-armed forces officers coming into the industry. And with them, they are bringing in the value of understanding what loss prevention means and how security is to be done. So with that help, the regulation of the way security is viewed is changing.
So you think client education is a big part of it? Clients have to be told and inducted into what security can mean to them and their business?
See, yes, you need to make them aware of the fact. You need to make them understand what value you as an organization bring to them. They understand what security is. The problem is, how do you actually make them understand that you are the right setup for them?
So what is your suggestion to them, to those leaders who want top security services but they won't invest in it? What is your suggestion to them?
They need to actually understand what is the organization which they are dealing with. Right? What are the values that organization works with. Because if there is an integrity and if there is a value for human life and there is the value in terms of the environment and other ethics there, then you will actually do a proper job for them. When you do a proper job for them, they will actually see indirect values. So we have got to make them understand what are the indirect values which come to them out of this thing. That is where the industry needs to focus.
And sir, since you've changed the very dialogue on security, you view it as a cost, not as a cost center, but as a profit center. So my question to you is that when there are people who are inexperienced and they are put in charge of, this company's security, how do we deal in that kind of a scenario? How do we tell the clients that this is not the right way to approach? Throw some light on that aspect as well.
See, basically what happens is that, as I explained to you, there are two things which are happening. One is that awareness in the industry is growing for people. Two, a lot of knowledgeable people from the armed forces, etc., have exited retirement, etc., and they have started joining organizations and bringing in a structured approach towards security. The third thing is that there are a lot of new courses, etc., which all these people are doing, and they are learning more advanced values. So they are trying to bring that in. Now, when they bring that in, the challenge which actually they face is they view security as the need of the hour. But for an organization like a security company, it has to deal through multiple channels. So there will be a procurement part of an organization. That department is only looking at cost. Then there's an HR part. They are looking at compliances.
And somebody from finance
comes in and tries to say, this value is a bit too much.
Yes.
Right? Security, what we turn around and tell organizations is that the bill that we give you really doesn't affect your balance sheets down to 20 decimal points. But what it will do is it'll create a safe environment for you to be able to run your business properly. We do not want that there should be any problems within a business. We need to preempt it so that you can run. When you're going to be profitable, we are automatically going to be...
So collaborative growth.
It has to be a collaborative thing. So we always try and tell organizations that finance is important, of course. Procurement process is important. You need to be able to identify who the right one. But today, the good part I've noticed is that the CSOs of organizations are today coming into the limelight in the views of the internal workings and mechanisms of our companies. So they are now having a more say in the matter. So there have been cases with us where we have not been the lowest price point. We've been much higher. But we've been able to explain to them why we are there. And the security heads over there have been able to actually say that we need these aspects. There is a cost to that aspect of what the security head wants for his organization. He is able to now make the CEOs understand.
Look at the picture.
Look at the bigger picture. Don't go by the smaller thing. So that is how things are changing in the industry now.
So a trained private security agency, how does that improve profits and performance?
See, today...
Throw some light on the training aspect.
I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Basically, see, in our organization and what I say to everybody else is that the trained guard knows what he's got to do, A, what he's got to look out for, B, but most importantly is that he is responsive to a circumstance. Very simple thing. The guard is standing at a gate. He's seeing a traffic jam happening in terms of exit or entry. He should know what he's got to do to facilitate easy movement of the trucks coming in and going out. At the end of the day, those trucks coming in and going out are the lifeline for that organization. Say if it's a manufacturing setup. How does that happen? Now, translate that into, say, a office setup or a building setup. If people are not going to, if the guard is not going to be able to give a comfort feeling to people coming in, that somebody is watching over everything, or that if there is something lying around unnoticed, if they are not reacting to it, where is the safety factor? So, as any employee coming into any organization has to have safety in mind. That is what the organizations also have in mind. Unless and until he's trained for those aspects, how will he perform his duty? A guy we talk in terms of a lot of security equipment today, basic firefighting equipment. See, the raw material for the industry basically is untrained people. The problem of the industry is that it is being viewed as a minimum wage industry. So, people want to pay the minimum wage. Now, if you're going to pay the minimum wage, you're going to get that kind of manpower. But that kind of manpower has never seen, say, a fire hydrant or a fire extinguisher or a fire equipment.
Totally.
How are you going to actually make him understand what he got to do? Right? So until you train him, until you spend time repeatedly making him go over the same thing by repeated training activities, he will never know.
Sir, since your work has changed mindsets, right? So how important are ethics in the private security industry according to you?
See, one basic thing I'll tell you is that CAPSI started off as an organization about 20 years. And we were the first organization which was there to support the setup of that in terms of financial support, because they needed to have a conference, etc. And I have always felt that an association is a very good way of trying to bring about ethics within the industry. See, today or way back 20 years back, there were a whole lot of people working in this. We were viewed as a chowkidar industry. Today, we are viewed as a security industry and a private security industry as an industry. That time, it was just chowkidars which were there. The CAPSI has been able to bring that mindset change. But along with mindset change, because a whole lot of people got together with the organization, and we've been able to work the idea of dealing with the government at one level, with compliances at another level, with the labor departments at another level, and then with the industry as such with a level. Now, there were a lot of challenges which were faced, and one, we've been tired. The CAPSI deals with the government challenges as a matter of routine. They keep on doing that. But we, down the line, about 6 odd years back, we actually came up, Kanwar Vikram Singh, our chairman, came up with the idea that let's try and bring about an upliftment of the way that the industry members tackle the business. So one of the aspects which he told me at that point in time, and I remember it was way back when we were having a conference out of Bangalore, he mentioned about the fact that let's set up a ethics committee.
Oh, that's where the idea came from.
Yes. And he told me, he said, you be the chairman of the ethics committee. I want you to start working on a document which we will float but please make sure that the document is the type which everybody can follow. I said, yes, that is one of the biggest parameters. So over a period of quite some time, with collaborative effect with a lot of other fraternity members, we came up with a document which was simple yet easy to follow for all our people, and also be able to give to our clients an understanding that the industry is changing. The people working within the industry are now viewing the change that is required because the times were changing, right? And we are prepared as an industry. Well, we called ourselves an industry. We are prepared to be recognized as an industry. The biggest challenge was to be accepting ourselves that we are an industry. That would have happened with one of the aspects was ethics. So we made that document, we put it out for people, and we are happy to say that a lot of people are beginning now to work along with that. It creates for a client an understanding that I am dealing with an organization which has basics in place. So the challenge was that when you were viewed down below to where you needed to be, you needed to move up step by step. So ethics was one of the steps. the CAPC has taken a lot of other steps in terms of quality control, in terms of QCI, this thing, ISO standards. So those are all steps. But ethics was one of the basic things because, see, you're getting money from a client for a service which you have to provide, and you got to provide the service with manpower. If you do not ensure that there is clarity in that aspect and that your client is able to understand that clarity, he will never have faith in you. And security, the basic fact of security is that they have to have faith in you, that you are their man on the spot.
So faith is the biggest
Faith is another
driving
way
force.
this thing.
Right,
So
right.
ethics brings that into you, right? So it gives the feeling of comfort to the client that he's not being cheated out of anything, either in a process or in financial terms or in the work part of it. So we looked at all these three aspects for this thing. So we were
Right.
able to build that and put it out, and
The response has
their
been
response has been very good,
great.
and that is helping the clients to actually view us now differently. So
The
today,
lenses have changed.
so the industry is
Right.
changing, times have changed,
Right.
and the biggest aspect is if we don't change with the time, we'll be left behind.
And so you are a thought leader, and you just now said that we have to adapt to the change. The times are changing. Is there any dialogue that you would like to initiate by virtue of this interaction? Any? It could be a trend, a security trend, anything that you have observed, or any dialogue that you want to initiate. Because you're a thought leader, we want to know that from you.
See, basically, a simple this thing would be that we need to tackle this at multiple levels, right? As I said, that we need to be viewed as an organization on which you can depend.
Dependable.
Right? Now, when you can be dependent, again, that gets viewed in various terms. Everybody has a different way of viewing it. Dependability basically is on what you're doing, and that is the industry. There are a lot of people who need to understand that money has to be made. There is no doubt. The client needs to understand that we need to make money. We all understand we need to make money, but how do you make that money?
So how is the empowerment going to happen according to you?
The empowerment has already happened in the fact that today social media, your media outlets, the very fact that a guard today is a lot more knowledgeable, he knows what are his dues. There's been a lot of activity from the government side where they have actually advertised the minimum wages, the labor laws, the other values which are supposed to get. The very fact that the government is today focusing a lot on things like POSH, etc. All these initiatives of the government and of clients, large clients also have been following them. They have also been insisting on the industry to do that. So when we move into those aspects, we are all able to work properly. But what we are feeling is that money has gone down. Yes, money will go down. From the way we used to make money then to the way we make money today, there is a total change. That is where I talk in terms of valuation, right? You cannot make undue money. You have to give up those aspects. You have to be able to see that how do you create an organization which will work ethically, because there is a whole segment of people who are prepared to pay for ethical work. Right? They are prepared to pay you money. You got to be able to make them understand why you need that money.
Correct.
You got to be able to make them believe in the fact that if you are saying, I want X percentage of service charge, you got to show them the value for that.
The value for that, correct.
Right?
Correct.
Value is got to be only done by proper work, proper trainings, proper ethics, proper processes, proper work conditions, how your people react, how the organization reacts. All those aspects work towards
you also spoke about PSAs changing their processes as per the client's needs, because it is going to be an evolving scenario.
It is always, see, security at the best of times is always evolving.
Yeah, nothing is
standard, nothing is static.
Yeah.
It is evolving. Circumstances keep on changing. A guy at the guard as a factory outlet is in a different environment. An office is in a different environment, and they are facing different challenges. threat level was there till 2 o'clock, then the gates were shut. Right? Today, the banks operate till longer hours. But look at a scenario where there's an ATM. That again becomes a 24 hours. A factory, you can have a gate. At an ATM, it is open. Right? Factory, you cannot get in. You could try stealing something. That's one aspect. But here, there's cash. Right? So the threat aspects totally change. And that is what we need to keep on evolving with.
Change.
Change is the biggest single factor there. And because of that change, your organization also has to be responsive towards that change, right? So today we feel that technology is going to take the way forward in terms of the fact that there was a word which was coined, we called man-tech. Man, that is our security guard, and technology. We bring the two of them together. You will be able to provide a better value to a client. Cost of a security guard is going up drastically on account of minimum wages, etc., etc. It is no longer a cost which anybody is prepared to overlook. There are necessities to keep that. So what is happening is large organizations which used to deal with a large number of security guards are looking at scaling that down, concentrating more in terms of technology. Technology has brought in a lot of ability to be able to remotely monitor circumstances so that you don't really need to have a warm body present.
Right.
You could have a reactive body present to a circumstance which can be monitored and dealt with. You see, so that is how things are changing in this scenario.
So these are the ingredients of a good PSA.
You have to have that.
Right.
Then technology is helping you to be able to do your internal processes much better. Like we as an organization have been able to achieve a huge amount of smoothness in our operations by the basic fact that we brought in technology. Not only does technology bring in smooth process internally, but it brings in a smooth process to a client also. Client does not need to get in touch with you to ask about questions. You can actually set up the technology to that events are explained, visits are monitored, discussions are tracked, events are controlled, responses are done, and everything works seamlessly, giving the client a feeling of comfort. He is not having to pick up the phone, ring up the organization, somebody goes running to do that. Technology has enabled all that. And if you do not utilize all those abilities, you are not going to be able to run an organization in an effective
And
manner.
how do you see the future of the private security industry in terms of financial figures? What growth rate do
The
you
growth
see?
rates will be at 20-25% annual growth rates will happen. But what is going to happen is that there is going to be a washout of the industry in the sense that you will the country is expanding, geopolitics is changing every day. There are new opportunities coming, so that's opening up a lot of opportunity for the industry. But to be able to get a part of that, you yourself have to change. So that is when I say the washout means if you don't change to deal with the new environment, you will not be able to
Change is the
change
keyword.
is again the
Right.
constant. And
Right.
change and adaptability to the change. How are you going to deal with the security doesn't work only singly in a single platform. It's a three-dimensional this thing, 360 degrees. You have to view it like that. You are working for a factory, very good, but they are a multinational factory. They could be facing total different challenges to a domestic factory. The challenges domestically are different. The challenges to multinationals are different. In a country like India, where multinationals are now moving in big numbers, how are you going to deal with that? So you need to have a trained force. You have to have the ethics in place. You have to have capabilities in place. You have to have technology in place. And with newer technologies being discovered, you have to be able to adapt to it.
So this conversation clearly tells me that you've not just focused on profits, but you've also focused on purpose. So what are the lessons that you, like,
See,
you mentor startups as well?
until and unless you
Yeah.
don't focus on purpose,
Yeah.
you will not get your
So
profits.
what are the lessons that you teach to these startups? You mentor them,
Yeah,
right?
I mentor a lot of startups. I basically
Yeah.
tell them in terms of the fact that ethics has to be there, commitment to the purpose, and the thought process has to always be maintained. You don't look for short-term benefits. Short-term benefits are very few. If you can pick up that, the numbers that the short term come up to you can be quite large, but don't always fall for that. You have to build an organization which is going to continue to give you profits year on year. Today, you could make maybe in a short span of time, maybe ₹1 lakh straight away. Very good. It's fantastic to look at, and you are tempted to do that. But would you rather do that, or would you rather make ₹25,000 for the next 50 years and keep on growing that value? That is where that 1 lakh is going to end sometime. But that 25 is going to continue to growing.
So as a mentor, what is that one lesson that you would like to give to young entrepreneurs or who's looking for a career in PSI or some other industry? What is that one leadership lesson that you would like to impart?
See, they will have to work with a long-term vision, adapt to technology, and yet remain ethical in the way that they're doing.
Amazingly put, sir.
These three things are the most important.
Amazingly put, sir. So now we've reached the end of this wonderful discussions. There will be quick answers, and you have to tell me the first thought that comes to your mind.
That is a challenge.
So, yes, I'm sure it's going to be exciting. So, discipline or empathy?
Empathy is the bigger part. Discipline is the base.
Okay. One private security industry myth that you want to bust?
The myth basically is that every one of us is only interested in profits. We've got to make people understand that security is a larger aspect.
Would you like to say it again?
The aspect when you have to actually do it, because security as an industry is got a very large part to play within the country's growth also. We were just recently at one of our conferences discussing about the basic fact that actually security industry is very important for the security of the country, because we have over 1 crore people deployed all over. Can we utilize them to be the eyes and ears?
If you restructure this line, say if it's a myth that maybe clients have or generally people have about the private security industry, what would that be? Just in one line. You want me to skip this question?
I think
it can't be answered in one line. Okay. So a leadership trait you swear by?
I would basically say that empathy and the value of what you are doing.
Okay, empathy and value of
ethics.
What you are doing. Yes,
ethics.
Yes. And most fulfilling milestone so far in your life?
The biggest thing has been that within my organization, we have been able to actually beat our own expectations.
Wow, amazing. And what keeps you going?
The basic fact that there are a whole lot of people who are dependent upon the actions that we as an organization take. Because if I've got 40,000 people there, I am looking at the fact that there are families beyond them. And those families are also dependent upon the way I interact with my people, or I interact with my clients, or how I run my organization. And I am happy to report that people would rather work with us than leave us. That is the essence of what we have achieved.
That keeps you going. And what is your success mantra? And that is the last question.
The success basically is being to be honest to the people that you're working with. Because they need to understand and have the faith that they have put their faith in you. And how are you reacting to that faith? So that is the biggest standing.
So thank you so much for your time, for these knowledge showers, for these words of wisdom. Readers, our viewers will have a lot to learn from you. And हमारे साथ बने रहिएगा. We will see you soon with another stalwart, another life journey. Don't go anywhere.
Thank
Take
you
care.
very much.